incisor has already erupted, but the left side central incisor was not erupting. Then the patient consulted one of the dentists, and then she was referred to me, and a compound composite odontome was found sitting behind the incisor. So I have removed the tumor, but we have saved the tooth, and then later on, with the help of the orthodontic treatment, it came into occlusion. This is the tumor, and this is the tooth. You can see it was displaced by, this is the central incisor, which was displaced palatally. Tumor is removed first, and then this was exposed. Orthodontic bracket was placed, and then it was lately, and then lately it was pulled down. This is the tumor. Keratocystic odontogenic tumor, these are one of the commonest problem which we come across. Not commonest, if you ask me, I come across more of the ameloblastoma compared to the KOTs. I will go for see the recurrence rate of keratocystic odontogenic tumor ranges from 15% to around 60%. If you go through the literature, some articles they will say 15%, some they will say 47 to 55%. So basically, because it is an aggressive tumor, so I generally prefer to, if it is a big tumor and it is infiltrating into the bone, depending on the radiographical findings, I generally do resection. It is hardly, there was a small swelling, that's it. A big tumor, and along with that there is a tumor in the coronoid process also. So initially it was treated by conservative therapy. This part of the coronoid was however removed, and I will show you that even after removal of the coronoid, later on this coronoid was developed, because whenever you leave periosteum, so you can find out that the whole of the coronoid can also develop. I have removed the coronoid, and I have done basically curettage, not with I can say marginal resection of the tumor, and I have put the graft. This is the patient's post-operative photograph with occlusion after a year. I have put the implants in second stage. You can see that whole of the coronoid has developed. This small girl of 12 years, she was having multiple odontogenic keratocysts, a huge odontogenic keratocyst here, a huge odontogenic keratocyst here, a huge cyst in the maxilla, but she was not basal cell Leber syndrome. So initial, and in these cases, in this young child, it was not possible to resect the mandible here, resect the mandible here, so I decided to be conservative. I have done the curettage, I took out the molar, both sides I have done the curettage, and it was good curettage, and then I have done the grafting also in the same stage by alloplastic graft. This is the PNS view. You can see on this side there is radio opacity because of the cyst. Left side there was a cyst. This is after enucleation. This is the graft. See this happens if you are doing curettage. A small cyst has developed again here. So it was recurated because I never wanted to sacrifice both side mandible in this case. So this was a recurrence, and later on patient again developed a new cyst here. So all these cysts were removed. This is the graph. This cyst has also healed. This cyst has also healed. This is after 2 years. You see, a patient has developed another cyst. But somehow I have missed the post-operative. Finally, this cyst has also healed. Ameloblastoma, these are the most common lesion and we come across, and this is the one odontogenic tumor which we have been following upon since long. So the treatment protocol of the ameloblastoma is quite well established. It is radiograph again is not non-pathognomic, only suggestive of a lesion. Radiolucency or radiopacity, shape and form is also not specific of this tumor. May contain unerupted deciduous or permanent teeth. Lesional edge may distinct or indistinct. That gives you an idea what you have to do. Root resorption and teeth displacement, expansile distortion of the normal and orbital features of the maxilla and mandible. Projects as relatively radiopaque lesion. Unicystic ameloblastoma. Patient came with a small swelling on the left side of the mandible. Radiograph showed. You can always do a DD of denti cyst, but it turned out to be a unicystic ameloblastoma. Huge ameloblastoma. You can see when you do the surgery, you find out that how big a lesion is. A reconstruction on the same sitting was done along with mini plate. You see, there is an advantage of the mini plate. I have been observing if I am putting a reconstruction plate, because reconstruction plate takes all the load of the this iliac crest. So the chances of resorption are more with the reconstruction plate as compared to the 16-hole mini plates. This is pre and post-operative of the patient. Now you can see that from where this is the graph which we have placed initially, and this is the good graph after acceptance. Multicystic ameloblastoma. Huge lesion. Again, you can see the huge lesion. Again, whole of the resection was done, and we have reconstructed on the same sitting. You can see if a good reconstruction, you can achieve the occlusion, you can maintain the facial profile, you can maintain the front. You can hardly make out that any jaw has been decepted if you do the good reconstruction. This is initially after the reconstruction, this is after the acceptance of the graft. Odontoameloblastoma. I have done long time back. The patient came to me maybe 17 years back with swelling. He was only 7-year-old at that time. A big odontoameloblastoma. Because see, it was not possible at all when I started operating. It was not possible at all to shell it out. So I have done the resection along with rib graft at that time, and you will see that when you do the rib graft initially at the age of 7 or 8 years, a bone good amount of bone always forms. This patient is once he grows 15 years later, this is no recurrence, and you see that good amount of bone always forms over the rib graft. So this can be utilized for putting the dental implants. I have done the dental implants. I have restored the function with the dental implants. And then peripheral ameloblastoma, this patient was operated around 10 years back at some other center. Then the later on patient has visited only 6 months back to us, and she was having recurrence of ameloblastoma along with the, that was turned out to be ameloblastoma. It was peripheral ameloblastoma because it was involving all the mucosal tissues. And this reconstruction was done at that time. It lasted very long. Good reconstruction was done, but somehow there was recurrence. So we have done the resection of the tumor. We took out the plate, and this patient is still on intermaxillary fixation because it was not possible. There was hardly any mucosa left, so it was not possible to do any reconstruction. So we decided to remove the plate. We have done just intermaxillary fixation and then secondary reconstruction. So it depends on cases to cases. Mural ameloblastoma, as I was initially telling you, looks like dentigerous. This young child, when she came to us, it looked like an dentigerous cyst, but somehow biopsy showed that it is a mural ameloblastoma. So I decided to resect the mandible that time, maybe 20 years back. I have resected the mandible, occlusion was maintained, a rib graft was done. You can see even the rib graft, if it can turn out to be a good bone after many years. So this is how the patient looks like after 20 years. This is the occlusion, and this is the, you see good amount of bone has already formed because I did the reconstruction initially at the age of 7 years. Good. Then we have done the dental implants, restoration of the teeth, and she won Miss Fresher of the college. So I would like to conclude that whenever you are doing resecting the jaw, you should always do good reconstruction, because you don't know, and your aim should be to provide good aesthetics and good function to the patient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhirendra Srivastava. Any question from audience? Only one question will be accepted because we are getting late. Not even one? Dr. Pullar. Okay.
I'd like to know, in that case of cementifying fibroma, do you routinely do stenting or cannulation of parotid duct? It was in the upper GBS region. So, any need for that for your
What was the question? Parotid?
Do you do routine cannulation or stenting of parotid duct?
See, I have to see whether it is, I don't do any stenting, but I always locate the parotid gland first, parotid duct first. So once you have located the parotid duct, you can retract your parotid duct and then you take out the tumor, because these tumors, they easily shell out.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request our chairpersons to please honor Dr. Dhirendra Srivastava. Please, sir.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Simarpreet Virk. She will speak on screening of the malignant pathology and role of health professionals.
Thank you, Amir. I'm going to now talk on screening of malignant pathology and role of health professionals. I've been told to go a little fast, so I'll be skipping a few slides But this is where all the students sitting here need to play, an active role in early detection of oral cancer, and they can contribute a lot into shedding the load of oral cancer. So cancer has been a scourge on the human population for many years, and is the 6th most common cancer worldwide. And in India and other Asian countries, oral and pharyngeal carcinomas comprise more than half the malignancies. And more than 1 million new cancer cases are being detected annually, and 90% of them are squamous cell carcinomas. Now, this has a well-delineated etiological factors, and 75 to 95% are attributed to risk habits, and majority of oral cancers have a long-standing pre-malignant lesions, and they can be easily detected. And I think we start reading about the pre-malignant lesions from 3rd year. So if we are aware of how they look like, and if you're vigilant, then you can do a lot in referring them. These are the risk factors that we are taught, and this is the overview of carcinogenesis, like from a normal cell through various of damages becomes a malignant tumor. And one thing that is disturbing is that most of the tumors in the developing countries are diagnosed and in stage 3 and 4. That is when there's very little we can do about them. So the 5-year survival rate, that's why, has not changed. And lack of public awareness, along with absence of knowledge for early detection of healthcare providers, are believed to be responsible. And the most logical approach for decreasing morbidity and mortality is to increase detection of suspicious oral malignant lesions. This is the oral cancer progression, and this is the appropriate, the mild dysplasia, this is the appropriate stage for early detection before it goes on to become this, and we can do nothing about it. Now, there are 2 studies we are doing in our department. One is for identification of high-risk groups. We are doing P53 in pre-malignant and malignant lesions. Principal investigator is one of the postgraduates. And another study is to see whether the follicle will develop into a tumor or not. For that, we are doing survivin and P53 and EGFR, and we have got some favorable results. Now, oral cancer is among the malignancies that would best benefit from this approach of early detection, and it affects that is easy to access. And for approaches, we basically have 2 categories. One is screening programs, and the second is diagnostic tools. Screening has been defined as the presumptive identification of unrecognized disease or detect by application of test, examination, or other procedure which can be applied rapidly. Now, it was George Papanicolaou who started the screening for cervical cancer in 1923. And cancer screening is currently not possible for many types of cancers, even when tests are available or not recommended, because of possible harms or the likelihood of test correctly identifying the cancer or possible harms. Now, whether suitable treatment is available and the cost of the test is also important. Now, the objectives of screening is to detect not only cancer, but potentially malignant disorders at the earliest possible stage, and to improve patient awareness, and also the risk factors like alcohol and tobacco. Now, these are the principles of screening, and I'm not going to go in detail, but it is screened if there's a health problem, and the facilities for diagnosis and treatment are possible, and there's a suitable test, and the test should be acceptable to the population. Why should be screened? Because 50% of over 45-year-old populations, they don't attend the dentist annually. And there's an evidence that many cases are missed by dental practitioners. This is probably because early lesions are not specifically looked for, or they may appear innocuous. So there was a study in Kerala on the effect of screening, and they found there's a potential of preventing at least 37,000 total cancer deaths worldwide if the screening can be divided into 4 broad categories. The population-based screening is when the whole population is evaluated for risk factors, symptoms, and signs. And training of health workers is needed in this. But it is identification of earlier stage cancers is good. But those who work there are disadvantages that those who work during the day, it is very difficult for them to attend, and they are the ones who are actually more at risk, the laborers, the truck drivers, the maids, and workplace screening overcomes these challenges. So what is a workplace screening? When population is screened at their worksite environment, suppose you went to Khanna paper mill and the workers are working there, so you can do a screening camp for them. And workplace screening cessation study was done in India, and screening of the oral cavity is effective when combined with tobacco cessation. So what comes out very, very important message is that tobacco cessation should be dealt with. Targeted screening is, now this is what is very useful in countries with poor socioeconomic status, when you're only targeting the high-risk individuals, and the greatest threat is amongst the lower socioeconomic strata. And this segment is most vulnerable because they also abuse tobacco and alcohol. And they have the most limited access to education, prevention and treatment. And these disparities should be addressed to push the provision of easy, accessible detection. So like we worked on, the current project is prevalence of tobacco-related oral lesions in truck drivers and helpers in Northwest Indian region. We have scanned around 1,000 truck drivers, and the incidence is about 21%, or more than what is normally present in the general population. So this is the cost effectiveness, and in this study they found that targeted screening of the group will ensure the screening can be offered at a reasonable cost in a limited resource setting. And because the inverse screening law says that people who have risk factors such as heavy drinking and smoking will be most unlikely to exhibit risk aversion behaviors such as preventive health visits. Now we come to the second part of my talk, which is the different screening methods. One is the conventional oral examination. This is, since there may be widespread dysplastic mucosa, the whole mucosa should be examined. The cervical nodes should also be examined, and particular attention should be given to high incidence for squamous cell carcinomas such as lip, floor of the mouth, lingual, vestibule, and side of the tongue. And most oral squamous cell carcinomas can be detected by a trained examiner, but early squamous cell carcinoma is usually asymptomatic and may appear innocuous and can be overlooked if the examination is not thorough. This is the 6-step screening. You are basically seeing the various sites, and these are basically these signs and symptoms that you have to look for: white patch, a non-healing ulcer, a lump, submucous fibrosis, paresthesia, dysphagia. And if any of these conditions are present for more than 3 weeks, following removal of, this is very important, if you've removed the causative agents, that is tobacco and alcohol, then you have to be on alert. And this is a quick reference chart for visual inspection of oral cavity for professionals who go out in the field and are not very well versed. Now, but it has been suggested that even highly trained healthcare professionals with broad experience cannot adequately identify all pre-malignant diseases and early-stage oral squamous cell carcinoma by visual inspection alone. So this is where the adjuvant tricks come into view. One of them is the Tolidin blue, which is a simple, inexpensive test, and sensitivity is high. And they showed in a study done by Zhang et al., they found that Tolidin blue preferentially stained visible lesions with high-risk molecular patterns and predicted risk and outcomes. But the limitations are frequently stains common benign lesions, and such as non-specific ulcers, false positive in conditions of trauma and inflammation, and low specificity in staining dysplasia. So these were the problems. No studies have been carried out in primary care till now, and some studies only include carcinomas or dysplasia. Histological diagnosis is rarely used as a gold standard. So there is a need to carry out studies on large samples in primary care to see their efficacy. Now, the light page detection systems, there are so many of them based on tissue reflectance and tissue autofluorescence, and they may help the practitioner to visualize oral mucosal abnormalities that are not readily detectable. So this is Visilight Plus or Orascoptic decay, and the blue-white illumination abnormal squamous, this is the blue light, and epithelium is reported to be distinctly white. And this is autofluorescence, that is the Wellscope. Abnormal tissue cells are detected, levels of autofluorescence appear dark compared to surrounding tissue. But we have limitations because structural changes can be affected by structural changes, metabolic activity, vessel dilatation, inflammation, and melanin pigmentation. And in Indian scenario, most of the people we have racial pigmentation, like a few people are dark colored, and which is also there in the oral mucosa. So this could give false positive tests. Then Dentaphy is based on an autofluorescence and tissue reflectance, and then comes exfoliative cytology. Now this is done to investigate mucosal abnormalities, and this is brush biopsy, which is, we don't have it in our department, but this technique offers advantages over the usual cytology because you can harness cells from more deeper layers. This is liquid-based cytology. And this is a study we did on tobacco abusers in our department, and we found large number of nuclear abnormalities in the patients in the persons who are abusing tobacco. In our study, we did a morphometry, and we found that the nuclear size in cancer, there are changes in the epithelial swamps. Salivary diagnostics is emerging as a newly developing and ongoing area of research, and saliva has been long proposed. It's easily accessible. It is non-invasive, not time-consuming, inexpensive, and this is a kit that has been developed by Dr. Wong and his colleagues, and they had sent it here for trial. We have turned around 100 cases. This is still, we have to do another 250 of them. So to see whether this kind of a test is, well, it can be used for detection, early detection, because of course this then goes for genomic studies, and a lab is needed. These are the molecular markers. We'll not go into the detail, but this all is what is present in the saliva, which can really help us. And then there's DNA image cytometry. And this is the comparative efficacy of different diagnostic techniques, which brush biopsy and Visilight and then Delscope. Now, researchers who have conducted a randomized control in India suggested that screening by means of visual and tactile examination to detect PMDs may not lower the disease-specific mortality in the general adult population, even in a country such as India, with higher prevalence of cancer. Successful translation of oral screening into reduced mortality requires the patient to receive confirmatory diagnosis, have continual access to health care delivery system, and complete a curative treatment regime. Now these were the recommendations, and when a clinician observes a persistent or progressive lesion, he or she must consider prompt referral to dental or medical practitioner. And these are the other potential diagnostic technologies. Now I'll quickly come to who should screen. For this we have dentists, trained dental ocularists, general medical practitioners, community nurses, and community pharmacists. Now health professionals have a major role to play. They can give advice, guide, and answer to questions related to tobacco and its effects. And you can educate the value of tobacco control, promote inclusion of smoking cessation, communicating research evidence about effective tobacco cessation. And these are a few of the camps we've been doing with Rocco Cancer Trust. And lobbying government and third-party players to fund you. And this is the free online training program for tobacco cessation. We are trying to formulate a tobacco cessation center, which have not been successful till now. The attempts are still ongoing. And I'm not going into the detail of this. Hygienists and the nurses have a huge role to play because they understand medical history sheet and able to help patients experiencing difficulty with questions. And now the dentist, the first and foremost role to offer preventive services, particularly to smokers and to patients, is of the dentist. Adopting a common approach to oral cancer screening so that the patients receive a clear message. And as we can see here, with all the practitioners, the dentist has a central role to play. And if the test is positive, then you can go in for other tests. You can repeat the test after 10 to 14 days and then, positive again. So this is a tobacco registry, an attempt to do, and the role of primary health care professionals. Now we have certain barriers to health professional involvement in tobacco control. There is lack of knowledge and skills about tobacco and tobacco control, lack of organizational leadership, and continued tobacco consumption among health professionals. And we did two studies, we did awareness of tobacco use and related factors among school students in Firozpur, and found that tobacco usage among school children was 11.47 in spite of 100% awareness of its ill effects. And since influence from friends and addiction were the reasons, it is important to create awareness among school children because they are the ones who are the most vulnerable. And in another study, we did oral cancer awareness in dental school and found that knowledge and experiences of dental students of our institute related to the management and prevention were not up to the mark. And there was a need to reinforce throughout the undergraduate dental course, particularly it should be introduced in second year, as early detection of oral cancer PMDs will provide better prognosis. Conclusion. Members of primary care medical team, including general medical practitioners, dentists, district nurses, together with community pharmacists may play a greater role. Despite the fact that oral cancer can be prevented, there's a significant gap in knowledge, aptitude, and perception. The socioeconomic disparities should be addressed, and all the diagnostic techniques, they require multi-center controlled trials. We should have one center which gathers information, and all of us get together, give them the information and compile information, and the adjuncts do help. They assist in lowering, they help in early diagnosis, but efforts must be made to introduce preventive measures that have the potential to significantly reduce the burden and help bridge the gap between research, development, and public awareness. So this is the center we are talking about, which is still under construction. Thank you so much for it.
Any questions from the audience? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There is an important announcement to make. We have a very important work task that pre-test assessment, post-test evaluation, and post-test assessment forms are there with the delegates already. They have been distributed, so I think they must have filled in it. After this lecture, please submit all the 3 forms at the registration counter with Dr. Ramandeep Khurana. And after the submission only, you will be able to get the certificate from the NAMS. Yeah, at the end of this symposium,
renowned otolaryngologist and head and neck cancer surgeon, operates on variety of head and neck malignancies. He is one of the key factors in anti-tobacco campaign running across India. He has numerous publications in various national and international journals. Dr. Prahlad Duggal, please. He is talking on diagnosis of oral cancer, global perspective.
Thank you, ma'am. I have been given the difficult task of standing between you and the lunch. Still, I'd like to thank Dr. Bal and Dr. Sandhu for giving me this opportunity to share my experience about the malignant lesions of oral region. And so, coming to global incidence, oral cancer is the 10th most common cancer in the world, and annually we see more than 4 lakh. Now this is the 2000 figure, more than 4 lakh new cases annually. And the unfortunate thing is that the prognosis, the 5-year survival, it has remained stable, or actually the mortality has increased over decades, despite a lot of improvements in the newer technologies and surgical methods. And you can see that India lies in the red zone because of our habits, and we are comparable. This is a Bhopal, Chennai, Mumbai data, and we are comparable with the world leaders in this unfortunate thing. The difference between the site distribution globally and in India is that in India we see the gingiva-buccal complex more, and in the West we see the tongue and thorax more. The reason is obvious, as Dr. Sandhu before me has told, that our habits, our population's habit, tobacco consumption is the main reason. And in India it is among top 3 cancers and accounts for more than 30% of all the cancers. Of course, the ancient gift given to our society was this, and now the newer modalities like gutka and pan masala, they have entered, but still tobacco, areca nut and other habits are the reason. And per hour we see 14 deaths in India because of oral cancer. This is an unfortunate situation, and we need to know why we are facing this epidemic of oral cancer. And another unfortunate thing is that most of the patients we are facing are coming in late stages, stage 3, stage 4, and the prognosis decreases so much that as the stage increases, the 5-year survival goes down even to 10%. So there is need for an early detection because it improves the cure rate, and of course it decreases the cost. In India, the cost factor also matters because there is nothing like national health scheme, and patient has to pay from his or her pocket. But why this delay? Dr. Sandhu has simplified my task, but the major reason is that there is inadequate access to the trained providers, trained service providers, trained medical healthcare providers, and of course low affordability. So the first contact, what we are seeing, those who are involved in the treatment part as well as the prevention part, is that even our newly passing out dental surgeons, ENT surgeons, all medical graduates or healthcare workers, they are not aware of when to raise the level of their suspicion, because somehow our training programs are not well oriented in that part. And this National Academy of Medical Sciences Symposium has given a very good opportunity for you people, and you should encash on this. Of course, whosoever is the health service provider at first contact, be it a healthcare worker, be it a dental surgeon, an ENT surgeon, a general surgeon, a medical specialist. So history remains important whenever a patient comes with anything, any complaint related to oral cavity, and personal habits are important. And in those areas, those setups where cancer surgery is being done, a head and neck surgeon or those who are part of that team, they should evaluate initially a patient coming with any lesion in oral cavity. And of course, tobacco remains the main culprit, and the rest all are insignificant because 90% of cases what we see is because of this. Of course, the clinical examination is much important, carries much importance. Complete orodental examination, performance and nutrition status. Then comes that what is this lesion? Whether you need a biopsy or you need an FNAC or something like that. I would like to point out that all those fancy gadgets which my previous speaker has shown, the visual examination by a trained person carries the most significance. And for our freshers or budding surgeons, few lesions, leukoplakia by definition by WHO is a white patch which cannot be scrapped off, and you need to differentiate it from such lesions where this is simple candida which can be peeled off, because the transformation to malignancy ranges from 3 to 25%, which is quite significant. And the red lesion, erythroplakia, it even carries the worst transformation rate to malignancy. This is something which is because of the long-term habit of tobacco use. And other than tobacco, the research is showing that areca nut is even the more culprit, a bigger culprit. Then such lesions, this is simple keratosis. So I'd like you to have a clear picture in your mind that which lesion to go for biopsy, which lesion not to go for. So when the patient gives a history that this lesion is standing for last 10 years, you can't peel it off. So usually there is no need for biopsy except in those cases where the patient is very apprehensive. And still, even in those cases, you should convince the patient that this is a long-standing condition. So in case you need a biopsy, then don't remove all the area. Don't do axial biopsies, because suppose that comes out to be a malignant lesion after biopsy, after histopathological examination, the revision of a scar for a malignant scar is very difficult. And similarly, this lesion, this was standing for last 8-10 years and was not decreasing or increasing in size. So such lesions, you can go for biopsy, telling the patient that this will not come, in your opinion, will not come as a malignancy. So you can, or he or she can become a little bit relaxed, less aggressive. You should also be less aggressive in such lesions. But in areas where you're seeing a typical erythroplakia or leukoplakia, you have to be more aggressive. This is a lichen planus. And then suppose you have diagnosed that this is a malignancy. What else from biopsy? So what else you need to do for that patient? So the primary, what we follow is, or generalized, whatever is followed in all the cancer centers around the globe, a chest X-ray, a USG abdomen for liver mets as the screening for distant mets, and if the lesion is abutting, oral lesion is abutting the mandible, a CT scan. MRI carries a role when we need to go for soft tissue dimensions, and when we want to see the operability factor like the infratemporal fossa involvement or perineural involvement, especially in adenoid cystic carcinoma. So at least 20% of oral lesions do not need any imaging, and rest 80% need, because we need to know the deeper extent, plan the therapy and assess resectability. So a good homework for residents is read this article, because tumor thickness carries a significance in prognosis. Then few other articles. In CT, puffed cheek technique, always ask for those lesions which are in the GBS or buccal mucosa, ask for puffed cheek technique. And for those who want to learn more, few of the landmark papers. And this is the sensitivity is 100% for MRI, but negative Negative predictive value is also 100%. But for bone invasion, still we go for CT because specificity is more. And few CT where you can see the upper alveolus erosion by the mask. This is another picture, a mandibular erosion, and an MR showing the infratemporal fossa involvement. For recurrence, this is distant mat, this is the axilla, and we can see a node. Ultrasound neck has got a lot of importance, especially in N0 necks and in combination with FNAC. So, where we are not seeing any clinically any node, so ultrasound does carry a good role. So PET, lot of fancy things are coming, but at present it is in post-treatment setting, RT planning, unknown primary and metastatic workup. Biopsy, whether to go for knife biopsy, punch biopsy. Punch biopsy usually gives a lot of crushing element, and this is the way to do a biopsy. You need to take a knife, take a wedge, and take the margin from the margin of the lesion as well as the depth of the lesion. So this is the picture all our residents should keep in their mind, because ultimately this is the biopsy which is going to lead us to the treatment planning. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Now I would request our chairpersons to kindly honor Dr. Prahlad Duggal. Please, sir. Now I would request Dr. C.S. Bal to please kindly honor our chairpersons, Dr. Jeevan Lata and Dr. Amnik Sandhu. Please, sir.
Now everybody can go for lunch and we will reassemble at 2. Thank you. इसके दरवाजे खुले हैं और immediately वापस लो, have lunch and we will restart at 2. Thank you.